0-100 on March 17, 1943, in the North Atlantic, 400 meters south of Iceland, convoy HX-229 plowed through 15-foot swells, carrying 41 merchant ships laden with 140,000 tons of cargo bound for Britain. 0-12 in the galley of the SS William Eustace, 28-year-old ship's cook Tommy Lawson washed dishes as the Liberty ship rolled violently. 0-24 above him on the bridge, Captain James Bannerman scanned the horizon with binoculars, aware of the impending threat. 0-30 the U-boats were out there, listening. 0-38 beneath the waves, 600 yards off the convoy's port beam, Captain Lieutenant Mansack sat in the control room of U-758, his hydrophone operator pressing headphones to his ears. 0-45 the young German sailor whispered, "Contact bearing 280. Multiple screws." The thunderous roar of heavy machinery echoed across the vast expanse. Approximately 40 vessels dotted the horizon, their captains' expressions a mix of determination and apprehension. Unbeknownst to them, the Wolfpack had set its sights on the convoy, poised to strike. Little did they know that a young sailor named Tommy Lawson had detected a peculiar pattern in the underwater sounds of the Liberty ships. A discovery that would forever alter the course of the Battle of the Atlantic. Over the ensuing 6 days, a grim tally unfolded as 22 merchant ships from Convoys HX-229 and SC-122 succumbed to the depths of the North Atlantic, taking with them the lives of 300 merchant seamen. This catastrophic event marked the worst convoy disaster since 1942. Admiral Karl Donitz, the commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, would later hail it as the greatest convoy battle of all time. The numbers told a harrowing tale. In March 1943, the U-boat forces inflicted a devastating blow, sinking a staggering 567,000 tons of Allied shipping, surpassing any previous month's toll during the war. Facing these alarming loss rates, Britain's food reserves are now projected to last a mere 3 months. Prime Minister Winston Churchill later reflects, "The U-boat peril was the sole aspect of the war that truly unsettled me." The German hydrophone technology proves ruthlessly effective, with U-boat able to detect convoy propeller noise from an astonishing 80 nautical miles away. Even individual merchant vessels inadvertently reveal their location from up to 12 miles out, their distinctive acoustic signatures, from cavitating propellers to engine vibrations and hull resonance, acting as a veritable beacon for German torpedoes. Allied escort ships exhaust every tactic, from zigzag patterns and radio silence to ASDIC sweeps, but to no avail. The convoys remain. The vast expanse of the ocean serves as a natural amplifier, enabling sound to travel for miles. Meanwhile, the stealthy U-boat prowls silently at depths of 400 feet, employing hydrophones to meticulously monitor their surroundings, patiently awaiting the perfect moment to strike. Unbeknownst to the Allies, the solution to this predicament will not come from a naval engineer or acoustic specialist, but rather from an unlikely source: a merchant ship cook who abandoned his formal education at the tender age of 14. In March 1943, at the naval headquarters in Liverpool, England, the Western Approaches Command has been engaged in a relentless battle against the U-boat for the past 3.5 years. They have exhausted every possible avenue, including the installation of ASDIC sonar on all escort vessels in 1941. This active sonar system can detect submerged U-boat at a range of 2,500 yards, but its effectiveness is contingent on the submarine being in motion. The U-boat forces had a distinct tactical advantage, as they could strike from various angles, including the stern or beam, while evading the ASDIC cone's detection. Worse, the ASDIC system proved ineffective against surfaced U-boat attacks at night, which was the preferred modus operandi of the Wolfpacks. In 1942, scientists at the Admiralty Research Laboratory developed a groundbreaking technology known as high-frequency direction finding, or HFDUF, to track U-boat radio transmissions. This system excelled at locating submerged submarines that broke radio silence. However, once the Wolfpack established contact with a convoy, they ceased transmitting, relying solely on passive listening. Meanwhile, the Allied ships continued to broadcast their locations with every turn of their propellers. By early 1943, the Royal Navy had invested a staggering $8.7 million, equivalent to $560 million today, in a desperate attempt to solve the acoustic challenge. The renowned Professor Patrick Blackett, Director of Naval Operational Research, authored a classified paper that shed light on a critical challenge. His analysis revealed that the underwater sound profiles generated by merchant vessel propeller cavitation and machinery resonance were detectable at extreme ranges. Regrettably, without a fundamental redesign of the hull, which was impractical given wartime production constraints, convoys would continue to inadvertently broadcast their positions to enemy hydrophones. The expert consensus was clear. It was simply not feasible to make a merchant ship quiet enough to evade hydrophone detection. Dr. Harold Burris, the Admiralty's chief naval architect, further elucidated the underlying physics in a memo dated February 14, 1943. He explained that a Liberty ship's propeller, measuring 15 feet in diameter, rotated at 76 rpm under load, displacing a staggering 202,500 tons of water. This immense displacement resulted in the formation of cavitation bubbles, which, the thunderous roar of propeller blades slicing through the water, unleashes a cacophony of broadband acoustic energy, spanning the frequency range of 1/100th of a kilohertz. German hydrophones are meticulously engineered to detect this precise sonic signature. Reducing this propeller noise would necessitate a complete overhaul of the propulsion system, entailing a staggering 6 months of dry dock time per vessel and manufacturing capabilities that simply elude our grasp. The stakes have never been higher. Britain's lifeline, with 2/3 of its food and all of its petroleum transported by sea, hangs in the balance. In March 1943, the relentless onslaught of German U-boats sinks ships faster than Allied shipyards can replace them, with the gross tonnage lost exceeding the gross tonnage launched for 3 consecutive months. At the pivotal Atlantic Convoy Conference held in London on March 4, 1943, Rear Admiral Leonard Murray, the commander of the Royal Canadian Navy, delivered a sobering assessment. The Atlantic Forces commander delivers a stark assessment. Regrettably, our escorts struggled to detect the enemy submarines due to the overwhelming noise generated by our own convoy. The adversary can pick up our signals from a considerable distance. Unless we resolve this acoustic detection challenge, we risk losing the Atlantic by the summer season. A British naval engineer proposes installing sound-dampening mounts on every piece of machinery aboard each merchant ship. This solution would cost an estimated $250,000 per vessel, requiring 12 weeks in dry dock. With 2,400 merchant ships in the Atlantic convoy system, a full retrofit would take a staggering 138 years to complete. An American scientist suggests an alternative approach, coating the ship's hulls with rubber to absorb sound. However, this idea was tested and ultimately rejected, as the rubber proved unable to withstand the corrosive effects of saltwater. Within a short time frame, the phenomenon generates substantial drag, diminishing ship velocity by a staggering 3 knots, further jeopardizing the safety of convoys. A Canadian engineer proposes an innovative design, featuring swept-back propeller blades to mitigate cavitation. While an excellent concept, it proves completely impractical, necessitating the retooling of every propeller foundry across North America and the scrapping of 14,000 existing propellers. By March 15, 1943, Allied naval commanders reluctantly accept the harsh reality. There exists no technological solution to address the acoustic signatures of merchant vessels. These ships will continue to broadcast their positions to any nearby submarines, leaving the only viable strategy as deploying additional escorts, enhancing air support, and praying that enough vessels survive to maintain Britain's position in the war. However, 800 miles to the west, aboard a merchant vessel battling through the tumultuous North Atlantic, a galley worker is about to defy all expectations. Thomas Patrick Lawson, a native of South Boston, Massachusetts, born in 1915, never earned a formal degree. Forced to leave school at 14 to support his family during the Great Depression, He worked as a line cook and then as a galley hand on coastal cargo ships. When war erupted, the 26-year-old joined the U.S. Merchant Marine, not out of a desire for heroism, but for the lucrative $125 monthly pay, triple his previous earnings in Boston. As his captain's June 1942 evaluation attests, Lawson, the ship's cook, TP, was deemed adequate in his 908 performance, with no leadership potential, and was recommended for galley duties only. As one crewmate remarked, "Nobody expects genius from the guy who makes breakfast." After the William Eustace successfully navigates 3 convoy runs to 921 Liverpool, Lawson develops a peculiar habit. During his off-watch hours, he 927 sits in the engine room, listening intently. The other crew members consider him peculiar. "Tommy's going to get himself killed 933 down there," says first mate Robert Chen. "That engine room is hot as hell and twice as loud." But Lawson's presence there is not for the heat. He's there because he's noticed something. On February 19, 1943, in the mid-Atlantic, the William Eustace is traveling in Convoy SC-18, a formation of 953-63 ships in 9 columns. Lawson is observing the situation. The engine compartment was a scene of frantic activity during a U-boat alert. At 9:58, the ship's gruff Scottish engineer, Donald M'Leod, shouted at the cook, "Lawson, get back to your galley. This is no place for the ship's shutters. A torpedo has struck a vessel 2 columns over." Through the hull, Lawson could hear the aftermath, not the explosion itself, but the eerie, hollow booming sound created by the rushing water flooding the dying ship's interior. 10:28, and then silence. The U-boat could no longer detect any noise. Lawson grabbed M'Leod's arm, realizing the sinking ship had stopped making any sound. "Of course it stopped," M'Leod yelled. "It's full of water." Lawson grapples to articulate his thoughts. As water 10:48 inundates the hull, it halts the machinery's vibrations. The U-boat can no longer 10:53 detect the sound. M'Leod stares at him, uncomprehending. So, 10:58, what if they intentionally flooded specific areas of their vessel? Not enough to capsize it, 11:04 merely to mute the machinery's din. M'Leod's expression shifts from 11:09 bewilderment to disdain. "That's the most idiotic notion I've ever encountered. Return to your kitchen." 11:16 Yet Lawson cannot relinquish the idea. For 2 weeks, he sketches diagrams in a 1123 notebook, outlining water-filled chambers around the propeller shaft, strategically positioned ballast tanks against machinery mounts, 1130 and controlled flooding systems. He presents them to M'Leod, who dismisses his proposals. He 1135 continues. On March 24, 1943, the William Eustace arrived at the port of Liverpool. Lawson, a crew member, had 48 hours of shore leave. Seizing the opportunity, he made a bold and potentially career-altering decision. Lawson walked into the Western Approaches Command headquarters and requested to speak with an admiral about a matter concerning U-boats. However, his unorthodox actions did not go unnoticed. 2 Royal Navy Shore Patrol officers intercepted him in the lobby of Derby House, the headquarters of the Western Approaches Command. "You can't be here, mate," one of the officers firmly stated. Undeterred, Lawson had earlier presented his engineering ideas to the first mate, who had simply laughed them off. The first mate then showed Lawson's proposals to Captain Bannerman, who sighed and remarked, "Son, I appreciate your initiative, but leave the engineering to the engineers." Despite his enthusiasm, Lawson's suggestions were dismissed by the crew, as the cook's ideas were not taken seriously. The young officer, Commander Peter Gretton, had just returned from a harrowing convoy mission, his weary eyes reflecting the strain of the recent battles. As he crossed the lobby, a voice caught his attention. "I need to talk to someone about convoy noise," the man insisted, undeterred by the restricted military setting. Gretton, intrigued, approached the individual, his curiosity piqued. The man, Lawson, proceeded to share his observation: the eerie silence of a sinking ship, a phenomenon that seemed to suggest the dampening effect of water on machinery. Gretton listened intently, his mind racing with the implications of this insight. In the face of the relentless U-boat threat, Any potential advantage was worth exploring. The young commander, his fatigue momentarily forgotten, engaged Lawson, eager to delve deeper into this unexpected lead. On March 25, 1943, at the Ham dockyard in Liverpool, Commander Gredin summoned Lawson to the corvette HMS Sunflower, which was undergoing repairs. Gredin had initially dismissed Lawson's proposal as the most ridiculous thing he had heard that month, as water inside a ship was typically associated with sinking. However, Lawson's explanation of using small water-filled chambers around the propeller shaft bearing against the engine mounts to create acoustic insulation piqued Gredin's interest. Water, Lawson argued, could absorb vibration better than air, effectively insulating the ship's machinery. Intrigued, Gredin decided to give Lawson's idea a chance and brought him to the Sunflower to explore its potential implementation. On March 28, 1943, a daring experiment unfolded in the Mersey River. Lawson Gredin, a resourceful engineer, and Lieutenant James Whitby, from the Sunflower's crew, embarked on a covert mission to test a makeshift repair solution for the corvette's propeller shaft. Over the course of 3 days, they jury-rigged a prototype, welding empty oil drums around the shaft housing and filling them with seawater to simulate the weight of the engine. Despite the crude and unauthorized nature of their endeavor, they were determined to put their unconventional approach to the test. As the Sunflower motored out into the river at low speed, a nearby submarine, HMS Trespasser, submerged 500 yards away, participating in the clandestine trial. The team held their breath, anxiously awaiting the outcome of their unorthodox experiment, knowing that if successful, it could pave the way for a revolutionary repair technique, but if not, they risked severe consequences for their actions. The crew of the Sunflower held their breath as the hydrophones came alive. Lawson, standing on the deck at 15:07, watched intently as the captain of the Trespasser surfaced and signaled. "Heard you clear as day at 15:13, the captain reported, the engine noise and propeller cavitation all too familiar. "Failure," Whitby muttered at 15:19, but Lawson noticed something concerning. The drums they had filled while the ship was in dry dock were no longer full, the contents having drained through the seams. "We need to seal them, make them watertight," he said at 15:32. Gredin ran his hand through his hair, worried that if Admiral T discovered the unauthorized modifications to the warship, he'd face court-martial. The stakes were high, as the Admiral was unaware that the U-boat were sinking 20 ships a week due to their pride in refusing to test a Cook's invention. The team worked tirelessly, constructing sealed steel chambers and incorporating water-filled rubber bladders to dampen the engine noise. Their efforts culminated in a groundbreaking innovation, which naval engineers would later dub liquid acoustic dampening. On April 2, 1943, the second test commenced. The Sunflower motors roared to life, and the Trespasser submerged 1,000 yards away. Minutes ticked by in tense silence. Finally, the submarine captain reported, "We lost you at 400 yards. Gredin's face fell as he heard the chilling words. The hydrophones had picked up nothing but ambient ocean noise. "Say that again," he demanded, his voice tinged with disbelief. "At 400 yards, you disappeared," the captain replied, leaving Gredin to ponder the implications of this remarkable achievement. The vessel's mechanisms have been successfully activated. Lawson takes a moment to compose himself, his hands trembling with the weight of the achievement. It is April 3, 1943, and in the Admiralty boardroom in London, Commander Gredin urgently requests a meeting with Rear Admiral Max Horton, the Commander-in-Chief of the Western Approaches. Gredin is accompanied by Lawson, much to the dismay of the Admiral's staff, who view the merchant Cook with skepticism. Horton, a renowned submariner from the First World War, enters the room with 3 other senior officers and Dr. Harold Burris, the naval architect who had previously declared acoustic dampening impossible. Gredin presents the test results, revealing a remarkable 97% reduction in the hydrophone detection range, from 12 meters to 400 yards. The room erupts in excitement, the significance of this breakthrough palpable. The young American merchant sailor, Lawson, found himself in a tense confrontation with the esteemed naval leaders. Summoned to explain his unorthodox modifications to a Royal Navy vessel, he stood before the formidable Admiral Horton, Captain Rushbrook, and the agitated Dr. Burris. Undaunted, Lawson outlined his innovative acoustic system, which allowed the U-boat to detect their presence from miles away. As the senior officers debated the merits of his unconventional approach, Lawson remained steadfast, determined to demonstrate the effectiveness of his groundbreaking work. Britain. The esteemed engineer asserts that the machinery aboard the vessel generates vibrations, which then propagate through the hull and into the surrounding water. At 1842, he notes that water absorbs vibrations more effectively than air or steel. By strategically positioning water-filled compartments along the propeller shafts and engine mounts, one can create barriers that prevent these sounds from reaching the ocean, a concept that appears to violate fundamental engineering principles. Dr. Burris insists that the presence of water within the ship's structure leads to weight distribution challenges, stability concerns, corrosion, and issues with sealed chambers. Lawson, however, counters this argument, explaining that the water-filled compartments are specifically designed for acoustic dampening, not for flooding, and that they have been thoroughly tested. Burris remains skeptical, citing a single test conducted under controlled conditions in a river with a cooperative submarine, which he deems hardly conclusive. Horton leans back in his chair, contemplating what it would take to retrofit a Admiral, the proposal you've put forth is certainly ambitious. Modifying hundreds of ships, diverting critical resources, and implementing unproven technology, it's a tall order, to be sure. Greddon's point about our recent losses is well taken, however. 567,000 tons of shipping lost in March alone is a sobering statistic, and if we don't take drastic action, we may very well find ourselves on the losing side by autumn. Dr. Burris raises valid concerns as well. Retrofitting 2,400 merchant vessels would be an immense undertaking, one that our dockyards simply aren't equipped to handle. The steel is already earmarked for essential escort ships. Frankly, the logistics of implementation seem daunting, if not outright impossible. Yet, we find ourselves at a crossroads. The status quo is no longer tenable. Captain Rushbrook, I understand your reservations, but we must consider bold, innovative solutions. This may be our best chance to turn the tide. The risks are high, to be sure, but the potential rewards could be the difference between victory and defeat. Let us explore this further, weigh the pros and cons, and see if we can devise a feasible plan of action. The future of our war effort may very well hang in the balance. The prototype on Sunflower, as Admiral Horton explains, only required 3 days to construct. It's not a complex engineering feat, merely welding sealed chambers around existing structures and filling them with water. Any dockyard crew can handle this task, and ship's engineers can easily maintain the system. There's no need to retrofit every vessel, just enough to test it in real-world convoy operations. Captain Rushbrook leans in, aware that if the experiment fails, it could have significant consequences. However, as Lawson quietly notes, the process doesn't actually take 6 weeks per ship, contrary to expectations. This unauthorized test, if successful, has the potential to alter the entire course of the Battle of the Atlantic. Admiral Horton approached the window, his gaze fixed on the tempestuous weather outside. After a moment's contemplation, he turned to face the assembled officers. Commander Greddon, he declared, you will retrofit 6 merchant ships in convoy en route 184, departing Liverpool in 8 days. Mr. Lawson, you will oversee the installation and train the engineers. The Admiral's eyes swept the room. Dr. Burris, you will provide technical support, even if you believe this endeavor to be madness. He paused, the weight of his decision evident in his expression. If it succeeds, we will implement this solution fleet-wide. If it fails, Greddon, you will spend the remainder of the war commanding a minesweeper in the North Sea. The officers rose as one, their faces a mix of trepidation and determination. They knew the stakes were high, but the Admiral's unwavering resolve left no room for doubt. The 2117 experiment, a risky gambit, now rested on their shoulders. Time was of the essence, and they would have to work swiftly to ready the convoy for its perilous journey. The Orkney Islands. Lawson gazed intently at the commander, awaiting his response. "Mr. Lawson, I'm not sure if you're a genius or a madman, but we're desperate." "Don't make me regret this decision," the officer said sternly. Lawson swallowed hard. "I won't, sir." On April 11, 1943, the Liverpool dockyard bustled with activity. 6 merchant vessels underwent crucial modifications: the SS Daniel Webster, SS James Herod, SS John Davenport, SS Samuel Eliot, SS Benjamin Key, and Lawson's own ship, the SS William Eustace. The installation process was remarkably straightforward. Teams of workers welded cylindrical steel chambers, each 24 inches in diameter and filled with seawater, around the propeller shaft housings. They also installed water-filled rubber bladders against the engine mounts and steamline supports. The total added weight per ship amounted to 18 tons. The installation process took a total of 64 hours and 23 minutes per vessel. Naval experts expressed skepticism, noting the makeshift appearance of the plumbing system integrated into the 23-minute engine room. However, the hydrophone tests told a different story. Before the modifications, a Liberty ship's acoustic signature was detectable at a distance of 11.7 meters. Afterward, it could only be picked up within 0.4 miles, a remarkable 29-fold reduction in noise. On April 22, 1943, a convoy of 43 merchant ships in 9 columns departed Liverpool, escorted by 6 corvettes and 2 destroyers. The 6 modified ships were strategically positioned throughout the formation, with 2 in the starboard columns, 2 in the port columns, and 2 in the center. The convoy commodore was unaware of the ongoing experiment. If U-boats attacked, the test's success or failure would be put to the ultimate trial. The German naval intelligence had been closely monitoring the convoy's departure. On April 25, 1943, at 2:14 a.m., aboard U-264, Captain Hartwick studied his charts as his hydrophone operator had been tracking the convoy sounds for the past 6 hours. The contact was weakening, with the original bearing at 290 degrees, but the signal was intermittent. Some ships were very loud, while others were almost silent, which puzzled the captain. Perplexed, he ordered the U-264 to periscope depth, and through the scope, he observed. The flotilla was in disarray. Sonar readings indicated only 27 of the expected 43 vessels were detectable. Tragically, 16 ships had vanished from the acoustic spectrum. 6 were completely silent, while the remainder were simply too distant for the hydrophones to register. Faced with this unsettling situation, the commander made a critical decision to target solely the ships they could clearly track, sparing the stealthy modified vessels from their lethal barrage. On April 27, 1943, some 600 miles west of Ireland, the U-boat Wolfpack Group Mesa made contact with Owen 184. Over the course of an 18-hour onslaught, they succeeded in sinking 9 merchant ships, a devastating blow to Allied supply lines. The fateful encounter resulted in a devastating toll, with 3,200 men adrift in lifeboats and a staggering 47,000 tons of cargo lost to the depths. However, a critical statistic emerged. None of the 9 ships sunk were modified vessels. Remarkably, the 6 ships equipped with Lawson's acoustic dampening system survived the ordeal unscathed. When the convoy reached New York on May 7, 1943, Commander Gredin promptly relayed the findings to London, confirming that the modified vessels had evaded enemy engagement despite their comparable positions within the formation. The acoustic dampening technology had proven effective under combat conditions, prompting an immediate recommendation for its fleet-wide implementation. The Western Approaches Command statistical analysis, conducted in March 1943 before the acoustic dampening system was deployed, painted a grim picture. The average U-boat detection range stood at 11.4 nautical miles, and the convoy's loss rate per Wolfpack engagement was a staggering 31%. The implementation of acoustic dampening technology in 1943 had a profound impact on the Battle of the Atlantic. Prior to this advancement, German U-boats were able to detect and coordinate attacks on Allied convoys from a distance of up to 50 meters. However, after widespread adoption of the new system in May to July 1943, the average detection range was reduced to just 0.6 nautical miles. This dramatic decrease in U-boat detection capability led to a staggering 85% reduction in ship losses per convoy engagement, while U-boat losses increased by 400%. The Wolfpack tactics employed by the Germans became ineffective, as the submarines could no longer coordinate their attacks on targets they could no longer hear. The month of May 1943 became known as Black May in German naval history, as the Allies gained a significant upper hand in the Battle of the Atlantic through the implementation of this transformative acoustic dampening technology. The Allied forces dealt a significant blow to the German submarine fleet, sinking 41 U-boat vessels, which amounted to 25% of their operational submarine forces. This came at a relatively low cost, with the Allies losing only 58 merchant ships, compared to 96 in the previous month. Admiral Karl Dunnett, the commander of the U-boat fleet, recorded his observations in his war diary on May 24, 1943, acknowledging the enemy's technical superiority in acoustic detection. This development had robbed the U-boat of their most effective tactic, the surprise attack, as convoys had become nearly invisible to hydrophone surveillance. The old certainties had vanished, and the German forces could no longer predict attack positions. A captured hydrophone operator from the sunken U-954 submarine on May 19, 1943, expressed the crew's bewilderment, stating that they could not understand what had happened, as they sometimes heard convoy sounds from great distances, while at other times, the convoys seemed to disappear without a trace. In the summer of 1943, the Allies faced a daunting challenge in the Battle of the Atlantic. Merchant ships were being detected by German submarines far too late, leaving little time to react. However, a game-changing solution emerged. By July, 847 Allied merchant vessels had undergone acoustic dampening modifications, reducing their detection range. The installation process became increasingly efficient, with crews completing the work in just 48 hours per ship. At a cost of only $20,000 per vessel, this measure proved far more economical than building new ships. The impact was immediate. From May to December 1943, Allied merchant ship losses plummeted from 729 to 329 vessels, while 237 German submarines were destroyed. This dramatic reduction in sinkings is estimated to have saved the lives of 4,200 merchant seamen. Yet, the Battle of the Atlantic was far from over. The war in the Atlantic raged on until the spring of 1945, but the tables had turned. The once dominant predators had become the prey. Post-war accounts shed light on this remarkable reversal. In 1946, Admiral Sir Max Horton reflected in his memoir that among the numerous innovations that secured victory in the Atlantic, from radar to escort carriers, none were as simple yet effective as Lawson's acoustic dampening system. A humble cook with no formal engineering training had solved a problem that had eluded the brightest scientific minds. As Commander Peter Gretton wrote in his 1964 book, Convoy Escort Commander, Tommy Lawson never fired a shot in anger nor commanded a ship, yet he saved more lives than any captain in the Royal Navy. His genius lay in perceiving what others had overlooked. The ingenious solution lay not in further technological advancements, but in the strategic utilization of the ocean's own resources. Between April 1943 and May 1945, a remarkable feat was achieved. 20,047 Allied merchant ships were outfitted with Lawson acoustic dampening systems, while 164 Royal Navy escort vessels underwent modifications. Remarkably, this endeavor required 51,000 tons less steel than the construction of 7 Liberty ships, resulting in a total cost of $6.2 million, equivalent to $400 million in 2024. This innovative system became the standard equipment on all U.S. Navy surface vessels in the post-war era, evolving into the Prairie Masker noise reduction system, which continues to be employed on American warships today. The modern Prairie Masker systems now utilize compressed air bubbles instead of static water chambers, but the underlying principle remains unchanged. the creation of acoustic barriers to conceal the vessel's presence and movements. Lawson, a modest man, was awarded the British Empire Medal in 1945 for his wartime contributions, but he shunned the spotlight. In 1947, when the New York Times sought an interview, he politely declined, stating that he had merely noticed something and mentioned it, while others had done the real work. After the war, Lawson returned to Boston, where he opened a small diner in Dorchester, married, and raised 3 children, never publicly discussing his role in the Battle of the Atlantic. It wasn't until 1978, when a British naval historian researching convoy innovations tracked him down, that Lawson's wife learned the full extent of his wartime achievements. The life of the unsung hero who revolutionized naval warfare came to a quiet end in 1991 at the age of 76. His passing was marked by a brief obituary in the Boston Globe, which described him as a retired restaurateur and merchant marine veteran, omitting any mention of his groundbreaking acoustic dampening system, the 4,200 lives it saved, or the fact that a high school dropout with a notebook forever changed the course of naval history. Yet, at his funeral, 3 elderly British naval officers, who had served on convoy escorts in 1943 and survived because Lawson's invention had concealed their ship's approach, paid their respects, with one leaving a note in the casket that read, "Because of you, we came home." In 2011, the U.S. Naval Academy recognized the significance of this unsung hero's contribution, adding his remarkable story to its curriculum. Innovative breakthroughs often arise not from formal credentials, but from keen observation, unwavering resolve, and the audacity to question established norms. Lawson's success, for instance, stemmed not from specialized training in acoustics, but from his attentiveness to details that eluded others. In the realm of warfare, the most perilous mindset is not the belief that something is impossible, but the assumption that this is how it's always been done. Today, the U.S. Navy's surface fleet universally employs Prairie Master acoustic reduction systems, tracing their origins to the sketches of a merchant cook's notebook from 8 decades past. The distinction between triumph and defeat can hinge on a single individual's ability to perceive what the masses have overlooked and the fortitude to voice their unconventional insights.